I think that storytelling really is an art. One of the exercises we used to do in journalism school is like, read an article, now tell me the story. There's a difference between writing a story, which lawyers are probably better at, in my opinion, because what do? We love writing, we love editing, right? So we can go back and like make that better. But when we're doing an oral story, which is what we do at trial, it's like, how do you make your storytelling more compelling?
This is Courtroom Stories and Tactics by RVA Trial Lawyers, hosted by Sharif Gray and Niall Abuzaki.
All right, before we get into today's episode, I want to take a minute and thank Maximum Medical Improvement Partners, MMI, for supporting the podcast. As many of our listeners know, one of the biggest drivers of case value for our clients isn't just proving liability, but it's whether the client actually gets the right medical care and recovers from their injuries the right way. As we all know, when their treatment is delayed or incomplete, their cases lose value. And Maximum Medical Improvement Partners help solve that problem.
You're right, Sharif. My name is Dr. Stavicki, and I'm with MMI Partners. Our mission is to connect injured clients with the right clinicians and quarterback the client's medical care from day one, leading to stronger recovery, clearer documentation, and increased case value.
Thanks, Scott. For our listeners who are interested in getting in touch with you all, how can they find you?
You can visit us at mmi.partners. Again, that's mmi.partners.
All right, we're back. And today we are fortunate enough to have Amy Bradley, a trial lawyer up in Northern Virginia with Blankenship Keith, join us. Amy has a unique background in that she was a journalist, then criminal defense lawyer, and now a personal injury trial lawyer. And before we got on this episode, I know you and I were chatting, Amy, and it was very clear that we're both very lucky to have found this work and never want to leave it, right? So before we get into it, because I have a ton of questions, go ahead, take a minute or so and introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Amy Bradley. I am a principal with Blankenship Keith in Fairfax, Virginia, and I'm actually barred in Virginia, in Maryland, and in DC. I love taking catastrophic claims and trying them, working them up. Love helping people. I think that's my life's work. It's my passion. I kind of fell into this particular venue where we help people, but I'm certainly glad to be here. And thanks so much for having me, Sharif.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you. Well, let me take you back to your days in journalism. What did that look like?
Oh, it was quite the journey. So my major when I went to University of Missouri was broadcast journalism. University of Missouri, I think, is the world's first journalism school. And it has a wonderful reputation. One of the reasons I think it has that reputation is because it gives you hands-on experience while you are still in college. So the college owns a TV station. And so while I was still in school and learning and going to class, I also was working at a real NBC affiliate and learning the craft that is journalism. And one of my favorite things about going to Mizzou was that they have a huge emphasis. It's called the Missouri Method. And one of the things that we really focus on is telling stories. And so it's crazy because, transitioning from being a broadcast journalist to being a lawyer, I now realize that I just get to tell longer stories and more in-depth stories than I did when I was a journalist. But my daily, depending which station I was at, my daily routine was interesting. The very first station that I worked at, I produced and then anchored the morning show. And so I would go in the middle of the night. I would actually write the content for the show, prepare the tapes that would run, and then I would quickly get myself together and then co-anchor the show with another female anchor who was older than I was. She'd been doing it a lot longer than me. But because I was the new guy, I had to produce the show overnight. So I did that at my first station. And then when I went to Pennsylvania, that's when I actually was hired as a reporter, like full-time reporter. And it was interesting because the news director who hired me, he said, "I think you want to be an anchor." And I said, I wouldn't have applied for a job as a reporter if I wanted to be an anchor. And I actually loved reporting. And I love going out, and every day I have to find a story, tell a story. And at that particular station, we had to tell 2 stories every day. So me and a photographer would go out and we would figure out what the news of the day was, figure out an angle, figure out a story, and then go capture it. and then you have to edit it. And then usually I would do a live shot. So I would be on the air, usually at 5:30 or 6. We had 3 different newscasts in the evenings. And then I became a member of the I team. I was the only female member of the I team, which is the investigative team. So that gave me a little bit of leeway where I could work on more investigative work, because investigative journalism was actually what drew me to journalism in the beginning.
Right.
And so it was kind of neat.
Investigative journalism seems cool. I mean, you're like
Very cool.
You're like the detective.
Yeah, you're actually, that's a great way to sort of analogize it, is you're like the detective. And so your job is to dig, right? And so talk to as many people as you can talk to, find as many facts as you can find. And that can be researching. It could be at a library. It could be, now, of course, it would be online. But in those days, it was kind of a mix of different things. And so I would like chase down a tip and see where it led. There was some very interesting stories that we ended up covering, some that are probably not appropriate to talk about on this broadcast. No, I'm just teasing. But we did some really interesting work, and I loved it. I was passionate about it, but I also sort of saw that the writing was on the wall, and I might not want to do it for forever.
Yeah. It's an important societal function, right, to be an investigative reporter, because, I mean, there's power in what is being shared and what is being broadcasted. And anyways, I forgot what it was. I think it might have been when all the NSA stuff was going on. I remember following an investigative reporter who like broke the news and watched a documentary about it. I don't know. I just remember being like, man, they've got a cool job. So,
yeah. I mean, I really look at it like it is a pillar of our democracy, because if we don't have free information and if we don't have journalists out there digging to get the real stories, there's a lot of things that we would not be privy to just as regular everyday citizens that have other jobs that we go to for at least 8 hours a day, right? We just don't have the time to do that kind of digging. And I think that that's why it's so important to, a democracy, to a free country, that we have really good journalists.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about then, what was that spark that said, you know what, it's time for maybe to take a look at the law?
So when I was in Pennsylvania, I had the opportunity to cover 2 murder trials and a very large constitutional civil case. And for the very first time in my entire life, I sat through a trial. I had covered bits and pieces of, trials or maybe a verdict or something in other places, in other TV markets that I'd worked in. But I had never actually gotten to sit from, opening gavel to the, verdict. And watching the process, especially a couple of the murder trials, I loved watching the experts. I loved watching the attorneys do what now we do. Really, it's storytelling, but in like this really interesting, different way. And I loved the intellectual challenge of it. I thought, oh my gosh, that looks so much more intellectually interesting than what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. I also saw that there were, changes happening in the media that I was not excited about. So a lot of TV stations used to be owned by families, and they took a lot of pride in what they were producing. They took a lot of pride in their journalists, and they invested in you, and they invested in what you were doing. And unfortunately, corporations have really taken over media ownership. And so what that has resulted in is basically like a watering down of real journalism in television. And so I think you still have newspapers that are very invested still in good journalism, but I think TV stations more or less are mostly owned by corporations that are now more interested in profit than good journalism.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I mean, from what I've learned, at least in journalism, it can be difficult to make a living.
So difficult. So yeah, I wasn't going to bring that up, but since you said it, Sharif, I was making very little money, and I was actually in my 6th year as being a journalist, which maybe doesn't sound that long, but I mean, when you're moving TV stations and markets every year to 2 years, it's kind of grueling. It's really nice as a lawyer because I've been able to put down roots in one place. I literally was moving by myself because I didn't have a family. So I was moving by myself like every year or 2 years to a completely new city and state, where then I'd have to sort of start over. So there were a lot of factors. I think the biggest one was that I was a little bit bored with what I was kind of doing on a day in and day out basis. And I couldn't really see myself doing that when I was like 50, for example. But definitely pay was a factor. And then having to uproot myself all the time was also a factor.
Absolutely. Well, so law school, and then you don't jump into civil litigation, right? You go into the criminal work.
Yeah. So when I was in my first year at George Mason Law School, I begged Peter Greenspun and Christy Leary, who was working for Peter, if I could just come and work there for free. And I said, so I literally harassed Christy Leary. I would call her, she's now Judge Leary. I would write, Attorney Leary, please let me know when I can start working for you. So eventually they did let me come and start working there. And for those that don't know, because you probably have much more of a civil audience, Sharif, Peter Greenspun is the attorney that defended the DC sniper. So like we were doing crazy large murder trials. I don't even know how many murder cases I was involved in during my time there. So I just started as a law clerk, and then I ended up staying there 1 year as an attorney. So I was there all through law school, and then 1 year as an attorney. Fascinating cases, the most interesting work maybe that I've ever done. And so I started there, and then I sort of fell into plaintiff's work after. I then transitioned, when I left Peter Greenspun's office, I went to State Farm. So I was in-house counsel for State Farm, defending people who get sued, in car crashes and things like that for about 3 years, which is really that's where I got I call it like my trial shoes, because I just had tons and tons of trials.
Yeah. And that's something that, I tell people who say, hey, I want to be a trial lawyer. I'm in law school. In fact, I had a conversation with a lady yesterday who's super pumped. I think she's like a 1L or 2L, and she's already like looking. It's incredible. Like, I'm like, you're doing the right thing, but strongly consider going into criminal law first. But I also recognize like insurance defense is another way to get that experience, because it's just very difficult. I've found, and I've been very lucky, and I didn't realize it at the time, but to get a lot of trial experience on the criminal side, because it's just so hard to replicate on the civil side. I told this young lady yesterday, if I have 3 or 4 jury trials in a year, that's a fantastic year.
That's a lot of trials, jury trials especially, and especially when you're on our side, on the plaintiff side. On the defense side, if you're doing insurance defense, you will definitely get, at least 3 or 4 jury trials a year. But on the criminal side, you're going to see trials all the time, either as a prosecutor or a defense attorney. So I agree with you. I think if you, and I recommend the same thing, Sharif, when people are looking, they say, I want to be a trial lawyer. I say, well, you can always transition into something else, right? Because the skills are very versatile, but it's a great place to start is doing criminal work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's fun. What's really crazy is that I remember, at least for me, going through law school and all that, I was like, you know what? I want to be a prosecutor. That's all I wanted to do. And then I got into the Army, and they said, all right, Sharif, you're going to do defense work. And I was like, how dare you? Like, I'm a prosecutor. Like, that's what I want to do. And then I got my first few clients, and my eyes opened. Like, it ended up being some of the most meaningful, purposeful work I'd ever done. Now, I very much still love what I do now, and we can talk about kind of where the similarities are, because I imagine you and I probably have the same thoughts as to that. But when you realize, like, the Fifth Amendment matters, the right to remain silent, right? It's there for a reason. That
right.
People can be overcharged, people can be wrongfully accused, and that there's only so much standing in between the individual and the government. Right. And it's that criminal defense attorney. And it's a stressful, but just an immensely rewarding job. And I had the added benefit of getting to do in the Army. So my clients were soldiers. Right. And so it was really, really cool. And then back to storytelling, Amy, like, you can't make this stuff up. Right. Like, the stories that you hear, it's just crazy.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You definitely can't make it up. Yeah.
You can't make it up. Right. Like nonstop entertainment to some extent. Granted, it's not easy. But so I've never met Greenspun, but I remember being in court a couple months ago, and I heard his name, and then I could tell, like, he was at the docket call, and he was there for a car crash case. So I guess they're doing some injury work now too. But I've heard nothing but great things, and how he's an exceptional trial lawyer on the criminal side.
Yeah, he's the best. I call him the gunslinger. He's the best gunslinger I've really ever had the opportunity to sort of observe on a regular basis. I think his biggest skill set is that he can think on his feet and cross-examine on his feet like no one else I've seen. And it is definitely a skill set.
And it's something that you have to develop, right? I mean, it's not something
Right.
you're born with.
Right.
But
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of your firm. Peter Everett is someone who has been wildly too kind to me. Why, I don't know. But he gave me a lot of great advice a few years ago that I've followed, and it's really helped, especially in terms of like getting into more of the crime victim type litigation, which I love, absolutely love. In fact, right before this call, we have a new case involving a lady who was shot 10 times by an ex-spouse, former law enforcement. And there's some real questions and concerns about what the police did and also what they chose not to do that may have contributed to the situation. So it's fascinating work, and it's not work that you think of when you think personal injury, right? But can you talk about the types of cases that you all do and what that entails?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I will second what you said about Pete. Like, he's the most generous, wonderful mentor, and he's also my mentor. And I'm just lucky that I get to work alongside him and, like, saunter into his office multiple times a day and ask questions.
I've heard he can be an obnoxious UVA fan. I went to UVA, so like I don't have any complaints, but I've heard from others that he may wear UVA a little too much for their liking.
You know what? I'm going to take the fifth on that, Sharif.
All right.
Because I'm just like a Mason grad, so
We'll make sure Pete listens to this part of the podcast.
He's terrific, and yes, he is definitely a diehard UVA fan. So yeah, we do all kinds of interesting work. As you kind of mentioned, we do a lot of premises liability work. We do crime victim work. I know that Barkley Horn is really interested in continuing on with that. I know that's been a big part of Pete's practice. Rob and I really have enjoyed doing products liability with Rob. So we help people who are injured by defective manufactured products. Like right now, we're representing someone that got hurt by an electric trimmer. And it was like a manufacturer's recall on that. And so just really interesting cases and unexpected cases that I think, to your point, people don't think about, with personal injury attorneys. I think they think that we just do car crashes. I, in particular, really love trucking law. So I go to a lot of the AATA conventions and CLEs, and also I'm a member of the AHA trucking litigation group. So and both the women's caucuses for both of those different groups. And I'm actually going to China with the mother truckers in October. So I'm really excited about that. Just lots going on. I said China, I meant Japan. Sorry.
Same area of the world, right? But that's crazy. So what? Yeah. Now I'm curious. I mean, I can't let that go. What are you all going to do in Japan?
I mean, honestly, it's more of like a fun trip, but it's like cool that the group is going. There are not a lot of female trucking attorneys like across the country. And so it's a great opportunity for us to like get to know each other and just do fun things. So I don't think we're actually doing any work there.
One thing I want to stop on and pause on this for a second is one of the things that I've enjoyed so much about this practice area, just plaintiff's injury work, or amongst those who genuinely care and take this work seriously and find it purposeful. I mean, there's real community and there's real camaraderie. And that is something that I've just never experienced before. The idea of a rising tide lifts all boats is real, and people genuinely believe in it. Now, that said, there is another part of the personal injury world which they'll stab your tires if they could, right? Because they're worried about their market share. But among those who I think are doing this work the right way and for the right reasons, I have found the camaraderie and the collegiality to be second to none. And it sounds like you found the same.
100%. We are so lucky because, just like you said, if you find the right people, I have friends all over the country doing plaintiffs work that, I can call and ask for help. I can call and say, have you ever encountered this issue? And even locally, I mean, I think it comes from having an abundance mindset, right? There is plenty of work for all of us. And I would hope, just like I think that other people sometimes call and ask me questions, that, we should all be helping each other because, as you said, rising tide, we all benefit from that. And really who benefits from it the most is our clients. And so I love like the camaraderie in what we do. It's amazing. And I find that it's like nationwide. It's really cool.
It's amazing. No, and I've been very lucky and privileged to go to a handful of these conferences around the country, and it's nationwide. But again, it's among those who are genuine trial lawyers, like they really care. And I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So the criminal defense attorney, right, when they're asked at the cocktail party, well, how do you defend the person who, they did it, right? And the answer is, well, everyone deserves a defense. Everyone's a human, right? But the real answer is, at the end of the day, there's this thing called the Constitution. So regardless of what you think about my client, I want you to think about what this is on this piece of paper matters. Because if we don't enforce it and hold the government accountable to it for this person, then what's to stop them from coming after everyone else, right? I mean, that's more or less the answers, right? I actually think in plaintiff's work, there's a similar answer. And it is, we have an opportunity to do a couple things. One, accountability. Oftentimes, I'm sure you can relate to this. Our clients don't walk into our office and say, I just want a ton of money, right? No, they want someone to say what happened was wrong and they're sorry. They want accountability, right? And then the next thing is this level of deterrence, public safety. The hope is that if we are able to send a message through this litigation, through this case, then maybe this doesn't happen to the next person. And then the last thing is kind of, and for those who listen to the podcast often are probably going to roll their eyes when I say it, because I say it all the time, but we have this opportunity to be an advocate for the value of human life. The number is not an award. It is not a lottery ticket. The number is a recognition of the value of what's been taken from a person. So yes, Corny Sharif says we get to stand up in court and say human life matters, and it matters a lot. And this is the number that you put on it. And so I think there's a lot of similarities to the criminal defense lawyer and the plaintiff's lawyer for a number of reasons. I don't know.
I totally agree with you, Sharif, like 100%. And I mean, how lucky are we that we are chosen by our clients to be their voice in the absolute worst moments of their lives, right? And you could take that and you could say, that's somebody who's been charged with a crime. That's somebody who has been catastrophically injured or lost a loved one because of the negligence or wrongful act of someone else. And so I just feel so blessed, truly, that we get to be that person's voice and stand up for that person, fight for that person or their family. It's like the best job in the world. I can't imagine doing anything else now.
Oh, of course. And then when you add the trial into it, like, oh my gosh, like there is nothing more, for me, more professionally and exciting and nerve-wracking all at the same time of standing up in the courtroom and that pressure of having to be on your feet and think of a million different things and present the case in a persuasive way. I mean, I imagine for you probably get that rush similar to that rush that you had as an investigative reporter, right? I mean, like.
Yeah, totally. It's fascinating to me because, and I'm hoping that you'll agree with me on this, but you don't have to. When I come home from a full day of trial, like I had 2 trials back to back on, I don't know, some day earlier this week, because I do these pro bono protective orders for legal services in Northern Virginia. And I'm absolutely wiped out because you are like on your feet. You're thinking on your feet. You are thinking about all the things that could go wrong. You're worried about this person and what happens when they leave the courtroom. Like, there's just a multitude of things when you are in trial that when you're sitting behind your desk at the office, you don't have all those stresses and all that pressure. And I don't know why, but like when I come home from a day of trial versus like just a day at the office, it's like a totally different level of exhaustion.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, like your brain is tired because it's not, I don't want to call it a performance because it's not really a performance, but I do call it being on. You are on all day long, just having to, be there for your client, be there for the judge, be there to make sure that you're listening to every piece of evidence coming in, trying to keep out everything that shouldn't be coming in, respond to legal objections, right? It is a lot, but also, as you said, extraordinarily exciting. I love going to trial. One of the reasons I love doing those protective orders is just that it gets me, gets me a trial almost every single time. And so it's, if we don't have a big trial coming up in our work because we settled cases, at least I can get myself into court and have a trial.
Yeah, and you're staying sharp. I mean, the skill sets matter. And that's something that I think law school, I love you, law school, right? Your diploma's behind me. We paid you a lot of money and it all worked out, right? But law school doesn't do a good job of, and it's just, and not to say that maybe that's just not their priority, and I get it. But the skills that go into being a trial lawyer are very different from the study of law.
Totally different. I always think that in law school, really all you're doing is learning to read and analyze the law.
Yeah.
I mean, I even took some like trial ad classes and stuff like that, and that's great, and that was helpful. But I mean, where you really learn to be a trial lawyer is by doing it, and that's scary because it's like learning by fire,
Absolutely. And I think you can like really like hit exponential growth by getting the experience and coupling that with like the right training and mentorship. Then you can go through the roof. But it's amazing to me like how important of a skill set it is, because at the end of the day, right, we can work on a case for 2 to 3 years sometimes. And the only thing that matters is what happens for those 4 or 5 days in a courtroom. Like, I mean, now, granted, not to say that work beforehand didn't matter. It certainly did, because it's shaping what's going to happen in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
But the jury doesn't live with the case for those years in preparation. All they know, all they see about this case is what's presented to them in that courtroom. And so if the lawyer isn't ready to do that and hasn't developed that skill set, then they are not putting their client in the best possible position. But then on the flip side, like, it's fun. And so one of the goals, I think, of our podcast is to learn. I get to learn from people like you who come on. And then also our hope is that our listeners get to learn from guests like you and others that, one, you can do this. You don't have to be born some special way in order to be a trial lawyer. It is a learnable skill set. And 2, learn tools and skills on actually what you can do and where you can go find those, what trainings are available. So one thing I want to dig in with you a little bit, Amy, is I want to talk about storytelling. And I've come to believe that everything in life now is a story. Everything, right? And so much so, actually, like, took a storytelling class this past year, and it was amazing. It was about like TED Talks and all that stuff. And it was great for me because it opened my eyes to like, okay, well, if I'm looking at my trial, what story am I telling about the case? What story do I want the listeners, the jury, the court, the defense counsel, what do I want them to be hearing and feeling, right? And it's always a work in progress. I'm going to be a continual learner, but I really want to learn, like, at least from your experience in journalism, what is a good story? How does one go about creating a good story, telling a good story? And I recognize I just asked you a super loaded question.
I know. I was like, do we have 4 hours? Just
well,
seems like...
we do, but I think people will tune off after.
They don't want to listen to me drone on about storytelling. Okay, so I think that storytelling really is an art. And I think that everyone, including myself, can improve on storytelling. And I think the way you improve on it is by continually doing it. I'm really lucky because my best friend is a fantastic storyteller. And so she's always trying to one-up me on how we tell the same story. It's hilarious. But I think you could take anything. You could take your morning and figure out how to tell a story about it, right? One of the exercises we used to do, in journalism school, it's like, read an article, now tell me the story, right? So there's a difference between writing a story, which lawyers are probably better at, in my opinion, because what do? We love writing, we love editing, right? So we can go back and like make that better. But when we're doing an oral story, which is what we do at trial, right? We're telling an oral story. I think that's something that you have to develop. I don't think it's necessarily natural. Though I say that and I'm like, our whole lives are made of storytelling, right? When you see your best friend, you're like, what did you do today? And you tell a story. So then it's like, how do you make your storytelling more compelling? And I think there's elements that make a great story. You need a beginning, a middle, and an end. You also need a theme. Give you an example. One of, I think, the best themes in our industry that we can tell is story of the David and Goliath story, right? So little old David has to go up against Goliath, and you have to continually present the whole story of your case in that theme, through that lens, so that, the jury understands that your little client is battling this massive thing on the other side. It's really about like putting your client into the shoes of David, right? And making the jury understand that the other side is Goliath. And that's particularly easy when you're going against a company. It's not so easy when you've got, just two different, if we're talking about a car crash, if you've got two different regular old drivers. So then in that case, you might look for a different theme.
Those cases are so hard. I mean,
so hard.
What's kind of funny. So, I mean, our firm, we had a great result last week. It was against corporate defendant. Very proud. But what has gone somewhat unnoticed is that 2 weeks before that, we had I think, a better result because it was against an individual crash defendant. And like, I lose most of those cases, like almost always, because at the end of the day, like, how do you tell this story? And there's no David v. Goliath when you're dealing with the car crash involving the sweet old lady who hit your client, right? Like, so what do? What we did in that case, and it worked, is we were very upfront and said, we wish we weren't here. The defendant is a good person. We have no reason to think any differently, and by no means do we hope or even want to imply that this person is a bad person or meant any ill will to our client. Why are we here then? We're here because something happened that shouldn't have happened. Somebody was hurt who shouldn't have been hurt. And this is the opportunity that our client has to get full and fair value that recognizes what was taken from them. For whatever reason, it worked. But I'll tell you, Amy, like most of those cases, I lose.
It's so hard. I think you almost have to come up with exactly what you guys did, right? Like, so if you know that you've got a defendant, an individual that is very likable, that's going to be a problem for you. So you identify that early, right? And then you figure out, how are we going to tell this story so that we're not making them out necessarily to be the bad guy. It was just an accident, right? And so you sort of have to frame your story in that we're not trying to punish this person. We're just trying to make a harm right, trying to get justice for our client that was injured. And those are, in my opinion, also, Sharif, the hardest. I tried one in Shenandoah County that I lost. And I think it's because I think everyone on the jury was putting themselves in the defendant's shoes instead of the plaintiff's shoes. And I don't have a fantastic answer for how you prevent that from happening.
Oh, I don't either. I have a very good friend in California who is a fantastic trial lawyer, and he's told me time and again, he says, I am more impressed with the person who can get a 6-figure or even a high 5-figure result on a soft tissue individual defendant car wreck case than I am on the person who's going to get $1 million on a wrongful death case. And I agree with him because they're so freaking hard.
Yeah, they are definitely hard.
Well, let's go back to this.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the themes and David v. Goliath, which I agree with you if that theme exists in your case, it's an amazing one to tell a story about, right?
Yeah, that is like a classic. And I mean, there's other great themes. I think each case is different. So it's hard to like just throw out like, oh, this is a great theme. Like, this is a great theme. But when you get your case, like, I think it's never too early to start talking about theming. What's been suggested to me a couple of times is tell the story to your friends and family and then say, what did you get out of that? And then have them tell you back what they heard or tell you the story of your case. And it'll start to kind of become clearer, like what parts are sticking out to everyday regular people. I tell my parents the stories of my cases. I just finished up a case where a gentleman that I absolutely adored as a client was drugged by a delivery truck for between 35 and 45 feet in his wheelchair.
How did that happen?
Yeah, driver didn't see him. Isn't that wild? And he got drugged underneath the right front tire of the delivery driver's
35 to 40 feet.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there were gouge marks in the road. He was lucky to survive that, but then he only lived a year because he ended up having to have 3 surgeries during that year. Actually, the polytraumatic injuries really, over the course of the year, caused his death. And so when we presented that story to the insurance company, what we did was we said, this is either a survival action or it's a wrongful death, and we're ready to present it both ways to the jury. But I mean, there's so many interesting things about that case. You could have taken like any number of themes, but I mean, when I told that story, no one could get over that. How does that happen, right? So that probably was going to be the theme. How does this happen? The driver said that he thought that his engine dropped out. It just doesn't make any sense. If your engine drops out, do you keep driving or do you like stop immediately, get out and check? Like it, So I think how did this happen is a great theme for that case.
Yeah. Now I agree. And then also to see how the defense responds to that. And then what you can do to counter that, right? Like, I don't know. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, and then like I think, if you're talking about like a drunk driving case, it's a series of decisions that led us here today, right? And so you talk about choices, decisions and choices. And, I just think that every case has a few nuggets that you could theme from. And when I can't figure out what my theme is, I tell the story to other people and have them tell it back to me. And then it starts to become clear.
And my understanding is you guys also do focus groups and stuff as well, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. On almost every case, we do focus groups, almost regardless of size, because one of the things, that can get difficult is how do you value an injury? How do you value? I think valuing a life is even, it's almost an impossible task, right? Because there is no number that's going to bring that person back. So the only way to like get an idea of like what a jury would give, which is really what valuation is. That's all it is. It's like, what would a jury give you? I think you have to do focus groups, and we do them a number of different ways. Sometimes we just do like internal firm where we send it out to like the members of our firm. Sometimes we will bring pizza in and have a pizza party. Sometimes we hire a company to do a focus group, and they recruit jurors from like our particular jurisdiction that the case is filed in. So we do them a bunch of different ways, sometimes in person, obviously. And you guys do focus groups, right?
Yeah, funny enough, we're in about an hour, we're going to go do 3 of them. So there's a group in Richmond called the Rec Room. And this is unsolicited. So Rec Room, I hope you're listening, and I hope you give us a discount next time, because you're about to get a free sponsorship here. But no, they do a fantastic job. They're not focused on legal. Their main focus is marketing agencies. And so they have a facility with focus group rooms. So like the room we'll be in tonight, I'll be in a conference room with 8 jurors, and there's the one-way glass from an observation room, and my team and some of our paralegals will be in there, and they'll be watching, and it's incredible. And so,
cool.
Now so it's a lot of fun. It's like watching a jury deliberate, right? Like, have you seen, and I'm sure this is a dumb question, but you've seen the movie 12 Angry Men, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, even the black and white version of that movie is incredible. I mean, because you're watching a jury and like how they're coming to these decisions and the different tensions and conflict. It's so cool. But yeah, but that said, I mean, with focus groups, I mean, it's also very difficult to stay neutral. I mean, that's like, I need to make sure before I walk into that focus group tonight that I play a role in which the mock jurors do not think that I'm one of the attorneys. And I also have to remind myself that like, it's not my job for my case to win. In fact, I want my case to lose tonight because I want to know what all the issues are. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you can learn so much from these focus groups, and they can help immensely.
Yeah. And Sharif, I don't know if you would agree with me on this, but like, I find that in addition to the valuation, which is extremely helpful to us as we move forward with like, maybe a mediation, or even if we're just, trying to get a demand out and we need to know kind of where the jurors would fall. I find out the weaknesses of our case, right? So where do they get hung up? I mean, I have never had a focus group, like not yet to this day, where I didn't learn a massive weakness in my case that I had a blind spot for, or didn't analyze, enough to really get to like the meat of it. And every time you walk away from a focus group, you're like, we have to do X. We have to prepare for this. We have to do that, whatever. And there's no there's no substitute for a focus group. That's for
There
sure.
isn't. The case that we had last week where we got the good result, and we focus grouped that case because we were very concerned about damages. Could we show proof causation? Did this case have value? And the focus group told us without question, without hesitation, that the case had massive value. It was that focus group, that 1 hour deal, that led to us going the distance with that case,
Wow, that's
which is
great.
insane, right? I mean, an incredible tool. And you are not the first, and certainly will not be the last person to get on this podcast and say focus group, focus group, focus group, because it's just so important. It really
Yeah,
is.
I think you are doing your client a disservice if you're not focus grouping your cases, because I don't know how you figure out what the value is, because each case is different, right? I mean, we all have experience. We all can say, oh, on this case we got X, or this case we got Y. But there's differences enough and sufficient enough that I think it does change the valuation.
Well, and you know what? I mean, the way that we value cases, or the insurance adjusters value cases, is not how necessarily regular people value cases.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
totally.
Like,
Yeah.
this whole multiplier thing of you're supposed to, a juror doesn't walk into the courthouse and go, am I going to do 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times the medical bills today, right?
Right.
Because it doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't make any sense.
No.
yet. It doesn't make any sense.
I would love. I think I heard that the whole 3 times multiplier thing came, and I don't know if this is true, but I think it was the thought was, well, a third goes to the client, a third goes to the law firm, and a third goes to the lien holders, right? And so maybe that's where it came from. But if we take a step back and we think medical bills, I mean, if we break down the Virginia Model Jury Instruction on Damages 9.0 or 0000, whatever it is, there's 16, I think, different elements if you actually break it out. And only
Yeah.
4 of them are actual special damages, or actual hard numbers.
Hard bills. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so
Yeah.
the remaining 12 aren't. And for whatever reason, our industry has decided that an amount that an administrative professional at a medical facility chooses to charge a patient, that patient had no clue what they were buying, right, has in some way demonstrates the value of an entire personal injury case. And it just doesn't. Now, granted, I'm sure there are people who can say, well, it's correlation. And there's, to some extent, that's true. If someone's in the hospital for a month and they have a lot more bills, then chances are it's a more serious injury, right? But it's fascinating to me how we as a profession has kind of just adopted that model. But there are also lawyers who are pushing back, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I sort of love the whole idea of not even putting in the medical bills. But then on the flip side, it is such a risk to not put in any hard number, because then the jury's just well, what do we do? Right? We don't have a hard number. Though I do tend to agree. I think the defense industry calls it anchoring. And I do believe, especially in cases where we've got small amounts of bills, all you're doing is anchoring a low verdict, giving them something to hang their hat on. Whereas if you focus more on ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about the bills. This isn't about medical bills. We're not even going to show you what the medical bills are, because those aren't the thing that we're focused on. This was a case all about inconvenience, right? Then you go back to your theming, how are we going to theme this case? So this case has nothing to do with the lack of, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in treatment, but really it's about the fact that this person was a dentist and couldn't do his work for a 7-month period. I don't know, whatever. I'm just making stuff up.
No, you're right. And then not only just the lost wages aspect of it, but let's talk about, that was the person who dreamed of being a dentist. It was a person who spent who knows how many years becoming a dentist. That wasn't just his job, it was his identity, right?
Exactly.
He was Mr.
Right.
Dentist, whatever, right? And now he's waking up every day and he can't go do what he spent most of his life preparing to do. What is the value of that, right?
Man, how many times do we miss the client's loss of identity as it is a huge item of damages. I tried a case, I think that one was in where was that? Frederick County, maybe. And my client couldn't, he had a shoulder injury, and so he could no longer hold a shotgun, which is crazy, right? And you're okay, well, that's just, you can't do one activity. But that activity was his whole social life. And it was it was so much a part of his life and his identity that by talking about that and talking about what the loss of that meant, meaning he couldn't go hunting with his buddies anymore. They would call him and be like, hey, do you just want to come along with us even though we know you can't shoot? No, because it was depressing to him, right? So it was like, so you just keep plugging away at these ideas that are like, yes, it looks like one activity to the outsider, but like to him, it's so much more. And I think that that's like another thing that we really sometimes, I think, as plaintiffs' attorneys, we overlook is like a loss of activity. One activity in your life can mean a totally different social way of going about your life. And that's unfair.
Yeah. No, and that's where the value of this work is. That's why it can be so purposeful and so rewarding. But, well, Amy, this has been a lot of fun. I've got one more question for you. Is that all right?
Okay. Ready.
All right. If you could go back in time, and this is my favorite question, if you could go back in time to when you first started out your career, and you can pick whether it was when you got into journalism, when you got into law, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
I'm going to answer with regard to when I first became a lawyer, because I had so much fear. I was just so afraid, of messing up, of saying something dumb, of going into court and a judge asking me a question that I couldn't answer. And I would tell myself, just do it, right? Judges are humans. Opposing counsel are human. And I think if you keep that in mind when you're a baby lawyer, that everybody started and we all remember what it was like. And I would never, take advantage of a brand new attorney. In fact, I'd probably help them out. And so I think, what I would tell my younger lawyer self is don't be afraid. Just go and try. Do the best you can. You're going to figure it out as you go. And that's why they call it the practice of law. It's not perfection. It's practice.
That's right. And we have malpractice insurance, so it's great. But no, I'm joking. No. That great advice. And just to piggyback off that, I mean, I think that's equally applicable to even people who've been doing this for some time, right? I mean, you have to be able to push through that fear. Because if you don't have some level of fear, then you don't care, right? And so there's a healthy level. But no, I agree completely. Get out there and make it happen. I think young lawyers especially, and hopefully I'm still one of them, I hope, they have a lot more to offer than they may realize.
Definitely.
Yep. And there isn't that much separating them between the person with gray hair who's been doing it for 40 years, especially when we're talking about trial work in front of a jury. I mean, there's some, but it's not maybe as big of a gap as they may think it is.
Yeah. And let that fear be your, motivator. I worked really hard as a young lawyer because of all that fear.
Absolutely. Well, Amy, this has been a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you and your firm here in the near future. I'm sure we'll be in touch. So thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Sharif. This has been really fun.
Thanks for listening to Courtroom Stories and Tactics by RVA Trial Lawyers. Hosted by Sharif Gray and Niall Abusaki. Please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or any major podcast platform. Together, we're building a tribe of trial lawyers to remind the world what human life is truly worth, one verdict at a time.